Hey, it's Chris Allingham with the Virtual Weber Bullet. I'm sitting here in front of my laptop. Today I wanted to walk you through this article I recently updated on the website. It's an article for standing rib roast that uses Montreal steak seasoning as the rub. It's a really delicious recipe. It's something I did way back in 2002, but I recently published it again on the website for 2017 with some updated photography and updated content. So I wanted to just kind of walk you through the process I went through to make this really delicious rib roast, which is great for the holidays. First thing you're going to want to do is get yourself a good quality 3-rib standing rib roast. The one you see here is one that I got at Costco. This is a USDA prime roast. If you can't get your hands on prime, a USDA choice roast would be just as delicious. Well, maybe not exactly as delicious, but it'll be a very good substitute for an actual prime piece of meat. The first thing you're going to want to do with this roast is take off the fat cap. Now, I've cooked a lot of these before and never removed the fat cap, and that's okay. But I wanted to take it off this time because I wanted to actually get the rub onto the surface of the meat that I'm going to eat. You know, I don't really like to eat the fat that's on the top of a prime rib. I know some people do, and if that's you, that's fine, leave it on there. But I took it off this roast in order to get right down to the meat so I could get the rub on the meat and get a nice crusty surface with the rub on it that I would enjoy. So you can see here that I started just, you know, at the side of the roast, just trimming off this fat cap. There's really no perfect way to do it. Just pick a spot and start to cut carefully through that fat, making shallow cuts. Don't cut deeply into the meat, and it comes off fairly easily. You'll find that there are areas where you can actually just sort of grab the fat and pull at it, and it'll come up in kind of large sheets. Just take a very sharp boning knife and just kind of surgically separate that fat from the surface of the roast. You'll end up with something that looks sort of like this picture right here. You can see that I took off a lot of the fat. It's sitting there on the left, but there's still a large seam of fat and some silver skin on the top of the roast. I could have stopped there, but I decided to take that off too. So I just got under that silver skin with the tip of the knife and just worked it off and pulled that fat seam out of there as well with the knife. And you can see the result here. It's a really nice clean piece of meat on the top, which I'd be able to season directly. So having done that, the next thing was to tie this roast, and there's lots of ways you can do it. There's really no right or wrong way. We got a video you can look at if you're interested in how I like to tie roasts, but whatever kind of knot works for you is fine. Just tie the roast at each of the bones, so tie it on a 3-bone roast, tie it in 3 spots, and you'll be ready to then season the meat. This meat is seasoned with something really simple, some Worcestershire sauce, and the old McCormick's Grill Mates Montreal steak seasoning. So just take some Worcestershire sauce and just work it over all the surface of the meat to wet it, and then come back with that rub and apply a good layer of it all over the meat. You don't have to cake it on, but do put on a good generous amount on all the surfaces. And you'll end up with a roast that is, you know, nicely trimmed, tied, and seasoned. You could put it in the cooker, but what I like to do is go ahead and wrap it in plastic, put it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in the refrigerator overnight. It gives a chance for some of that salt in the rub to work its way into the meat to season it, and then it'll be ready to cook the next day. The trick is simply to just take it out of the refrigerator about an hour before you're going to cook it. So what I like to do usually is I get it out around the time I start to set up my Smokey Mountain Cooker and let it sit on the counter while I'm putting it together and, you know, firing up the cooker, getting the charcoal ready to go, and that's usually about an hour. As far as smoke wood goes, you know, this is a very expensive piece of meat. You don't want to over smoke it, so you want to use a light amount of smoke wood and something that's not too strong. Of course, oak is a very good wood in terms of beef, any kind of beef. So I did use 2 chunks of dry oak wood. You can see here. You could use something milder like a pecan or apple. Any other mild, you know, wood would be great, but oak I think is a pretty good choice. And there's no reason for you to have to soak this wood in water or take the bark off or anything like that. Just 2 chunks, kind of fist-sized chunks, should be adequate. Next, you're going to want to fire up the cooker. So I cooked this roast using the minion method. I poured about half of I filled the charcoal chamber about halfway with charcoal, and then I lit about 30 briquettes in my Weber chimney starter. I nestled that smoke wood down into the charcoal, and then I poured the hot coals over the top and spread them out, and then I immediately put together the cooker. I did put some water in the water pan to try to keep the temperature down, also to give me a little more moisture in the cooker. And that roast went on the top cooking grate. Before it went into the cooker, I did insert a probe thermometer into the roast, and you can see here in this picture that I'm sort of measuring at the end of the roast to try to figure out where the center of the meat is. I held my fingers on top to indicate the depth, and then I moved that probe back to the center of the roast, and I inserted it until my fingers touched the roast, and that's how I knew I had that probe right in the middle of the thickest part of the meat. And that was all wired up. I brought that out and then put that on the top cooking grate once I had my fire going, once I had my water in the cooker, and that went on the top grate. And this roast was smoked at between 225 and 250, and the cooking process here was to do a reverse sear. So I wanted to bring this piece of meat up to just shy or almost right at my preferred internal temperature, and then I was going to finish it in a really hot oven. So this roast took about 3.5 hours to cook in the smoker. I took it to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. I was shooting for like a medium rare internal temperature. Then I moved it to a preheated 500 degree oven for 5 minutes to get a nice sear on the outside of the meat. You don't want to step away from the oven at this point. It goes very quickly. You don't want to burn the roast. You just want to get a nice brown crusty surface, and for this roast it took me just about 5 minutes at 500 degrees. It will make a lot of smoke, so you want to turn on the fan in the kitchen so you don't set off your smoke detector. Then after you finish doing the sear, take it out of the oven and let it rest on the counter for 15 minutes. Let those juices redistribute, and then you can go ahead and slice the meat any way you like. And I just took the bones off. You know, some people say take the bones off before you cook a roast. I don't really do that. It's just as easy to take them off after you've cooked it. Cut those bones up. My wife especially likes to eat those rib bones as a little treat. And then I sliced the roast up into 1/2-inch slices. You can see here the meat was very, very juicy, very red from edge, almost edge to edge. You know, very much in the sort of the medium rare zone that I was shooting for, and it was really delicious. We served it with some au jus and some corn casserole as a side. You know, later I cut it real thin and made sandwiches out of it with a nice toasted roll with some garlic butter. And you know, of course, there's a lot of leftovers. We've got a household of just 2 of us, so a roast like this goes a long, long way. So what I'd like to do is cut up whatever's left over into nice individual serving slices, and then I use my food saver to store those for future use. So you take a nice thick slice of prime rib, slide it into the bag, fold over the top, put it in the freezer for about 2 hours so it firms up, and then you go ahead and get the bag out and you seal it up with the food saver. So by doing that, you've firmed up that piece of meat. You're not going to smash it and press all the juices out of it when you actually do the vacuum process. You don't get the juices coming up into the sealing area and flowing up into your food saver. That little tip of just, you know, kind of pre-freezing that meat for a couple hours before you seal it is a nice tip. And then when you want to enjoy it later, you know, sometimes we're wondering what we're going to have for dinner. I look in the freezer and say, hey, honey, how about some prime rib? I mean, you literally, you know, just pull it out and drop it in a pot of hot water that you've brought to a boil, turn off the heat, let it soak in the hot water until it's heated through, and you've got prime rib that's ready to go and almost as delicious as the day, you know, you originally cooked it. Well, that's it for this video on the Montreal standing rib roast. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll post the link to the video at the end here, also in the description of the video on YouTube. Also links to any of the key products and things that you saw in this video in case you're interested in those. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye. Please like and share our videos. Thank you.